So first part is the power plant. Today I had an interesting conversation about what is a power plant and what is an engine. So the power plant is all the surrounds from the actual machinery of the engine, and the information in this section is in basically chapter 70, 71. It's all about the engine and all the things up around the engine. And this is the section in the training and even in the aircraft manuals. Okay, so power plant is a real thing. If you think of the word power plant, so other than power producing thrust, which is the turbo machinery inside the engine, we also have the ability to produce electrical power, hydraulic power, pneumatic power. So calling it a power plant includes everything as well as the engine, the thrust producing part of it as well. How do you know what engine it is? It has a data plate on it. The engine data plate is located on the right-hand side of the fan, as you can see it. When we are talking about locations on an engine, it's an interesting fact. You're always looking aft of the engine, looking forward, and you use the clock. Okay, so if the engine, you can see my pointer here. So the engine data plate, for example, would be from aft looking forward. It's approximately at 4 o'clock position. Okay, 4 o'clock position on the engine, and that's how we locate components, and we name the component locations is just like this one. So aft looking forward from 12 to around about 3:30, 4 o'clock. Now this is a very interesting data plate because it's divided into two sections. You can see on the left it's a DGAC, which is IASA, which is France, because the engine could have been built by SNECMA, a French company, under IASA regulations. Or on the right-hand side, it could be manufactured by GE, and it comes under the FAA regulations. Okay, so you can tell the manufacturer of this engine, where it came from. If the left-hand side is filled in, then the engine came from a European manufacturing plant. If the right-hand side was filled in, then the engine will be coming from GE, Cincinnati, wherever, from under the FAA. All the rest of it is to do with the thrust. With the thrust ratings, as you can see, we have an engine configuration of thrust chart and how it works. So you have a core engine, which could be fitted to a 600 or a 700 or an 800 or a 900. Now, the engine that's fitted to a 600 will need to produce significantly less amount of thrust because it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 tons lighter than a 900. Okay, it's the same engine, but fitted to a different airframe with a different weight ratio. So therefore, these engines, you can manipulate the thrust rating of them. When they get delivered, they're delivered at these preset ratings. Okay, so for a 600, it would be rated at 19,500 pounds, 700, an 800, a 700 increased gross weight. This is IGWs for an increased gross weight. Okay, and 800 BBJ is a Boeing business jet. Okay, so these are the thrust settings preset from the factory. If you have any doubt, you know how it's all preset. Okay, on the data plate itself, we have the general engine data, what the N1 red line is, what the N2 red line is. Red line means the exceedance limit. Okay, the N2 red line, so you can see is 5,380 RPM. equates to the engine being at 104% power. Okay, you've exceeded its 100% rating, therefore you've gone over the red line, so to speak. The N2, same. The N2 is the back end of the engine, basically the HP side, where it runs at a significantly higher speed at 15,000 RPM. And the red line means if you go over the red line, you've achieved 105% of its normal working capability. The engine start limit, so these have to be adhered to when you're starting the engine. And the AGT, you can see different variants here because the EGT limit moves on the needle. When you're starting, it will set to 725 degrees. That's where your red line will be. So you start the engine, make sure you don't go over the red line. Once the engine's stabilized, the EGT red line will move, or the EGT limit will move to the next one, max continuous, etc., etc. So the engines are mounted on two mounts, so to speak. It's a bit of an unfortunate word calling it an engine mount because the engine mount is mounted on the engine, but the engine is hanging from the mount. Okay, so if you want to think about it like that, so there are two mounts on this engine, a forward mount, which is on the fan frame, and an aft mount, which is on the turbine frame. Okay, so you can see these locating pins. So these fit into the pylon so that it fits before all the nuts are inserted and and tightened and torqued and whatever. And it gives the engine rigidity, but it also gives it flexibility to move in all axes while it's still installed on the wing. So these are the connections between the engine and the aircraft on the pylon or the strut. Okay, some call it a pylon, some call it a strut. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you'll have all the liquids and the gases. You have the fuel lines, the hydraulic lines, the pneumatic, the bleed air going from the engine into the aircraft and then eventually to the pack. And on the right-hand side of the cowl, you'll have all the electrical cables, all the electrical plugs, the electrical power, and the EEC connections, and anything electrical is on the right-hand side. The Aircraft Maintenance Manual, Chapter 71, contains leakage limit specs for each drain line. So you can see all these drain lines now. So this one comes from the HMU, which is the hydromechanical unit, which is fuel. This is from the VSV, variable stator vanes, the transient bleed valve, the right VSV, various speed, the HPTACC is the high pressure turbine active clearance control. All of these are possible drain possibilities from the system. Okay, and therefore you can actually tell whichever one the leak is coming from, then that would be the culprit. So you'd have to go to the AMM and see the limits. Sometimes leaks from these drain lines can occur on an engine that is not operating or during the engine start. Okay, these aren't abnormalities. They can stop after the engine operates at idle for 5 minutes, and that's the first thing you'll see in the AMM is if you have a leak, first thing to do, run the engine for 5 minutes and see if the leak stops. So then you have what they call the threshold limit. So if the leak is less than the threshold limit, then no maintenance is required. You can release the aircraft. If the leak is more than the threshold limit, but less than the serviceable limit, then you can effectively defer this defect in accordance with the MEL for 25 flight cycles. These are just things I researched earlier. If the leak, though, is more than the serviceable limit, corrective action is required before the next flight. Okay, so if the leak is excessive, it's a running leak, Okay, then you have to bring it to within the serviceable limit and release it according to the MEL for 25 flight cycles, or replace the component to stop the leak. Okay, all of this will be found in AMM chapter 71, which contains the leakage limit specifications for each drain line. So here we have fuel. Here we have IDG, hydraulic IDG, oil, hydraulic pump, so hydraulics. So there's different liquids, yeah, and they lead to the specific line replaceable unit that they're operating. So the engine cowlings. The engine cowlings have, so they're subdivided into a inlet cowl. So this is a bolt-on unit, and basically it's used for aerodynamic smoothing into the engine. So it sort of guides all the sucked air into the engine and streamlines it in, and it also guides the air around that it doesn't get sucked in. The fan cowls, so you have a left and a right fan cowl. Here we have the left fan cowl, and here we have the right fan cowl. So they give access, once open, they give access to the fan components. Then you have the reverser cowling, or they call them sometimes C ducts because they're in the shape of the letter C, and they're hinged at the top and they close like that tightly around the engine. So C duct, thrust reverser, left thrust reverser, right thrust reverser. Okay, and you also have some components. You have a vortex control device. All right, and then you also have on the right-hand side exclusively, you have the oil tank access door to service the oil. So just behind here would be the oil tank. You don't have to open the whole cowling. You just open this little door. You have this vortex control device, which basically streamlines the air passing at really high speeds over the wing to produce the thrust. And here at the T12, we have a pressure relief door. You have to imagine there's a lot of hot air in all these areas, especially the front end where we pump in hot air to de-ice this leading edge here. So if the hot air is too excessive, then this access panel will blow out, just open basically, where the engineer can then close it at the next landing. Okay, it's hinged at the front, so if it blows out, it will just flap. It won't flap. It will be streamlined. Okay, and you'll notice it then when it lands that you'll have to close it again. Okay, now you can clearly see the difference, the separation between the engine here and the pylon or the strut. Okay, this is part of the aircraft, and this is engine.